Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Noelle and I review and unbox subscription boxes here on my channel. And today I have another book box review for you. This time the box was sent to me by Down the Rabbit Hole book box, which of course is our favorite book subscription for darker reads, including mysteries, thrillers, and even some horror. That said, consider this your trigger warning because some of the novels selected for this subscription definitely have very sensitive topics that could be really disturbing to some people, definitely some disturbing imagery. They can just be very, very intense. So be forewarned when you are listening to these reviews or getting into this subscription box. I will say the book selections though have been really, really great. Definitely books that I might not have picked up on my own that I found really, really intriguing. And that was definitely the case with this month's book, which was actually the December 2022 box. But we will talk a little bit more about that in a second. Down the Rabbit Hole book box is $49.99 per month. That does include domestic shipping. And of course, I do have a code for you. It is Noelle15. That will save you 15%. In addition to these monthly boxes, they often do some really great limited edition boxes, which are a little bit bigger in scope, as well as the gifts that are included, because this is a subscription box, and I love this kind of book subscription, where as you are reading along, you'll come to a page that has a sticky note, and then you open the corresponding gift. Now, what I love about this subscription is that sometimes, yes, the gifts are pretty literal, but sometimes they're a little bit of a looser interpretation, but that's definitely a good thing when you are dealing with those heavier, darker topics. In addition, there's often a bookmark, a playlist, some extra little bookish gifts to enjoy while you are reading. Love all those extras. What happens is they will kind of release hints in their social media leading up to the box's release, and then they'll actually have some book discussion questions when everyone is reading. So I kind of love that they're kind of adding that fun of a mystery as well as some elements of a book club if you wanted to read it that way. But let me go ahead and show you the interior of this lovely box. I do think they do a really nice job of it, and I will show you. They do, like I said, a bookmark, usually with a quote from the novel. Here's our QR code for our playlist, and then there is a nice kind of brochure that tells us a little bit more about the author. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I was very skeptical of this book, even though most of the books I have really, really enjoyed. When I kind of read about what this was about, the sort of premise for it, I was like, I am not going to like this. It is going to be way too fantastical. It's going to be a little bit too gory and horrifying for me, but I really got into Winterset Hollow by Jonathan Edward Durham. It's just such a trippy book. It's one of those things where, yes, there are talking animals and they're hunting down this group of friends, and there's an element of mystery because you're wondering why they're doing that, and there's definitely an element of horror and gore. It kind of had vibes of the overarching story of Haunted, where, you know, they're just getting picked off one by one. You're like, somebody's gonna die in the next few pages. But I suspended that disbelief right at the beginning, and I was hooked from chapter 1. So let me go ahead and read the blurb to you, and then we'll talk a little bit more. Again, this was the Let Your Nightmares Come True box. That was the overarching theme for this box. And then I will go through and I will read the passages that go along with the gifts. I don't think that there are major spoilers, but this is definitely something where if you read the synopsis, you kind of read what it's about, and you're like, this is not a book for me, go ahead and give it a try. I was just really impressed by the prose as well as the poem. There's this like epic poem that has to sort of hold the whole thing together. It's very sinister and dark and compelling, and I really, really did like it more than I thought I would. Everyone has wanted their favorite book to be real, if only for a moment. Everyone has wished to meet their favorite characters, if only for a day. But be careful in that wish, for even a history laid in ink can be repaid in flesh and blood, and reality is far deadlier than fiction, especially on Addington Isle. Winterset Hollow follows a group of friends to the place that inspired their favorite book, a timeless tale about a tribe of animals preparing for their yearly end-of-summer festival. But after a series of shocking discoveries, they find that much of what the world believes to be fiction is actually fact, and that the truth behind their beloved story is darker and more dangerous than they ever imagined. It's Barley Day, and you're invited to the hunt. Winterset Hollow is as thrilling as it is terrifying and as smart as it is surprising. A uniquely original story filled with properly unexpected twists and turns, Winterset Hollow delivers complex, indelible characters and pulse-pounding action as it storms toward an unforgettable climax that will leave you reeling. How do you celebrate Barley Day? You run, friend. You run. Like, I don't know how they would turn this into a movie, but it is definitely movie worthy. I mean, I had to sort of make my own list of the cast of characters to keep track of who was still around, and then I was constantly surprised where I was like, oh, I thought that this person was done, or I thought that this hound was done, but then they'll come back. So essentially there's like the 3 core friends, and then they wind up at Addington Isle, which is where the author, E.B. Addington, used to live, and where it's inspired his story about these 4 main characters that are all animals: a rabbit, a frog, a bear, and a fox. So the 10 of them arrive because they're just love this book so much, this childhood book, and then slowly they all get chased down. So it is kind of crazy. I know it sounds crazy, right? But I really enjoyed it, and you kind of learned a little bit about each of the characters of all 10 of the people that were on the island. You learned definitely about those 4 animals who do talk, for the most part. 3 out of 4 of them talk. You learn about the hounds, which are these weird, like, used to be people zombie creatures that they have trained to hunt. I know, it sounds crazy. Let's go ahead and move further into the box so you guys can kind of see. But they give us some reviews. Here's an image of the author, and then of course they tell us a little bit of a bio, which I really like that element of this, which I don't get necessarily from other book subscriptions. All right, you guys, so we had 5 main gifts in this one. And I'll just show you an example. There were 5 parts to this novel, and then each of the parts started with this poem, essentially, which was supposed to be the story of Addington Isle. The author, E.B., which kind of like reminds you of like E.B. White of like Charlotte's Web. So this is like Charlotte's Web and Beatrix Potter and Watership Down meets Donnie Darko and Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. I don't know. It's crazy. All right, let's see. We've got page 44 for our first one. So I will read the passage, and this is what it looks like when you come to one of these sticky notes, and then it tells you which gift to open, gift number 1. So let me see if I can remember. The rabbit pulled an ottoman to the center of the room and sat himself down, resting his paws on the head of his cane and allowing a casual slump to wash over his posture. Forgive the monkey comment, it's just disheartening to always be the sideshow, and I am an old rabbit and have grown patently tired of it. Runny waited for his guest to offer something in the way of an acknowledgement, but all Eamon managed was a nod of his head and a tentative swallow of stale, steady air. This will be much easier for you if you try to relax, Runny continued. I know your kind is fond of your gifts, but you would do well to stop thinking yourself Prometheus and every little thing you do the god's own fire, or this may prove to be a long night for the both of us. I'm sorry, Eamon finally eked. It's just, this is all unexpected. Understandable. Perhaps a few swallows of tea will help loosen up that bundle of nerves. My very own recipe, alderbark, spoiled wheatberry, pickled worm silk, and raccoon leavings. Oh, said Eamon, doing his best not to seem uninterested. That was also a joke, Runny mused, nodding to the porcelain teapot where the strings from several bags of store-bought tea were still hanging over its edge. It's Earl Grey, Lipton. Eamon chuckled and snagged the steaming cup from the tray and gave it a good whiff just to be safe. I'm not gonna, like, shrink down to nothing when I drink this, am I? Why, Alice, what you choose to do after you've had your tea is entirely up to you. Eamon smiled and immediately felt more comfortable after Runny picked up his reference. Comfortable enough to take a hearty sip in any case. So we go to gift number 1, which came in this nice little envelope. And you have probably already guessed what it will be. It is not Lipton, but it is Titulia, or Tiatulia, and it is, of course, some Earl Grey, and we did get 4 little packages, 4 sachets. So kind of a nice way to set the tone. So they're living in the manor that the author used to live in, these talking animals. I know, and they have kind of invited their guests in to stay for the evening. For Barley Day celebrations, I suppose we could say. The next one was on page 91. Let me see what we had for this. Oh boy. Okay, so Bing is the giant bear. It was kind of hard to imagine. I figured the rabbit and the frog and the fox all had to be like human size, and then the bear is like normal bear size, or maybe he's a little bit bigger as well. but Bing is the name of the bear. Bing was seething, his eyes darting back and forth between the guests and his great chest heaving in anticipation of a storm nobody else knew was coming. And in the midst of the starkest silence that Addington Manor had ever witnessed, he loosed a war cry that shook the very rafters and rattled even the rabbit's bones nearly to dust. No one moved a muscle except for the beast, who brushed past Flackwell and moved along the length of the table, stopping only when he arrived at Finn's seat, which was properly in the middle. The fox smiled a broad, unapologetic smile as he felt the cool of the brute's shadow swallow him, and as Bing leaned in toward the centerpiece, everybody stiffened with horror, only to see him grab the antique hourglass with his kingly paw and turn it over to set the sand moving. The great bear stepped back from the table with a huff and settled in for a wait. Bewildered looks began to fly, and a dull murmur rose from the crowd of feasters, and as Eamon turned to see that Runny was still staring down at his empty dinner plate, he felt it wise to ask him, "What happens now?" "My dear boy, don't you know it's barley day?" answered the rabbit, cold and unaffected, his ears still running red with blood and his eyes still somber and sunken. Runny turned to Eamon with a glare that spoke of the trials of some history he wasn't privy to, and as he reached down with his paw to stop his nervous leg from stuttering against the floorboards, he said only, "You run, Eamon, you run." Right? Doesn't that freak you out? Even besides the bunny that's talking to you. Yeah, freaks you out. I can totally imagine this as a horror movie. So we got this little mailer bag. Again, this was the December box, so it's snowflake mailer bag, which makes sense. And inside we have another box. And of course, let me go ahead and show you what we got for this one. We have, because it's barley day, we got a timer, an hourglass timer. But this one's kind of cool because it has 3 different speeds. And of course, anytime you see an hourglass, right, it's kind of freaks you out. So we have, let's see, it's 1 minute, 3 minutes, and 5 minutes. So kind of a cool thing. I don't know what I would use it for, but definitely an interesting thing to receive in a box. And you could use it for different things. I don't know, for exercises or something, just to have that visual. All right, the next one was on page 109. So a lot of them kind of came in the first half of the book, but this is like a book with a lot of action in it, you guys. So let's see. He's now being hunted and running away. Just on the other side of the threshold, Eamon finally allowed himself a breath. He quickly realized that the door he had just taken was far too small for the great bear to squeeze through, and so he welcomed the chance to stop and think, though the only thing that was racing through his mind was the question of whether Mark and Caroline were safe. That's his 2 friends. He listened for anything that might paint some picture of what was happening elsewhere, be it the crash of a hammer or the scraping of claws against the floor, but there was none of that. There were no desperate screams from his comrades or menacing growls from his hosts, and there were no sweet songs from the rabbit's viola or sinister diatribes from the fox. In fact, Eamon could hear nothing at all from the tea room in which he found himself except the silent song of the fossils that surrounded him. There were dozens upon dozens of porcelain and silver tea sets displayed on every surface and in front of every blank bit of wall, but it was a family of foxes sitting on a table nearby that caught the corner of Eamon's eye, and while there were far more pressing things at hand, he couldn't help but give himself over to the need to digress. There were 12 of the creatures in total, 1 painted on each of the 8 cups, and the other 4 adorning the matching kettle, milk boat, sugar bowl, and biscuit box, all of them finely drawn and brightly colored and looking rather happy to be in each other's graces. They were so lovely and pure that Eamon was drawn to them even in the middle of all that madness. But as he reached out to pick one up and cradle the sweet little thing in the palm of his hand, it jumped at him. The rattle of the cup against its saucer startled Eamon so readily that he leapt back a full stride. So he's like admiring the lovely items that are in this tea room, one that has foxes painted on it. So we actually got 2 gifts for gift number 3. So let's open those together. You may have already guessed, this one was nicely packaged, but I'll open them both and then show them both to you together. This was definitely my favorite item in this box because I have started kind of a little collection. This is a kind of a common item to receive in book boxes, and I have a mismatched, you guys know I usually like matching drinkware, but in this case it's a mismatched set of teacups and saucers that I've been collecting, and we got a very simple but lovely teacup and saucer. So no painted foxes, but I do love the little details. You can see that little notch on the handle. You can see that it's not perfectly round, it's kind of fluted. And then we also have, of course, the matching saucer where you can see a little bit more of that lovely detail. So I thought that was good. And of course he's looking at it and then jumps because he can hear the bear getting closer to him again while, you know, everyone has dispersed and he doesn't even know that some people have already met their demise on Addington Isle. The next one comes on page 191. Let's see if we can find this. Yes, there were so many twists and turns, and it's very suspenseful. I did not know what was going to happen at the end. So let's see. Okay. So there is another talking creature besides the ones that are hunting. It is Olivia the owl, who sort of talks in strange riddles. What did she mean when she said it was the others like her that clipped her wings, he said. Other owls? Are there more? I mean, she said they banished her here as if they have rules or laws or something. That's what it sounded like to me, Eamon replied. In the book, each of them watches a different tribe. It's sort of their calling to observe and remember, just like the foxes are good at games and the frogs are good at cooking and the bears build. And every time they cross paths with each other, they share what they've learned. And I guess the idea is that given enough owls meeting other owls, eventually they all know everything. It was his way of explaining the mythology behind their wisdom, although it seems it wasn't really his idea at all. Just like everything else in that book, apparently, he said before clearing his throat and recalling a bit of Addington's work. So here's an example of the poem. It says, "And so the owls sang their tune above the earth and 'neath the moon, knowing what they'd seen was worth a whisper and a word. And as the council gathered near and soaked their beaks in barley beer, they spoke of all the secrets they were careful to have heard." You know, my mom used to use that to keep me from telling lies when I was a little girl, Caroline said, as she braced herself on the trunk of a tree to navigate a particularly slippery section of slope. "There's no lie the owls won't hear. We never went to church or anything, so it was like her way of guilt-tripping me into the context of something I loved, So, of course, we have to have something to represent the owls that are all-knowing, all-seeing, and definitely the owl Olivia comes in clutch. She is a important character in this novel, as angry as Eamon gets with her at one point. So I thought this was kind of interesting. Now, I am not like one who loves owls, even though they were very popular for a while. So we have this owl pendant, right, on this scarf. So it's kind of like a big statement scarf or necklace because you can wear it, right, and then you just use the weights of the ends to sort of drape it over and bring it around, right? So like this. It kind of looks cool, in all honesty. It kind of seems like something that the art teacher in your school would wear over a big, I don't know, simple frock or kind of tunic. But this is what we got to represent the owls. I thought that was kind of different. I thought we would get an owl necklace or something, which I probably would have worn or used more, but I've never really seen a scarf with these kind of weights, like a decorative scarf / fashion necklace before, but I thought that was a cool interpretation of it, and I'm glad that Olivia got represented in the gifts. And then we don't have another gift until almost the very end of the novel, which was not really very long, but again, you do have to really kind of do some close reading because there are so many characters in here. So let's see what happens here. It was only after those words had left the rabbit's mouth that Eamon noticed the chamber's centerpiece, a man sitting on a chair made from twisted gun barrels and broken stalks. His skin was held together with chunky leather stitching that cut across his body like aimless train tracks on some map of what he once was. He wore no clothes, and his face was locked in an expression so horrid that Eamon could only assume it was a portrait of how he died. And as for how he lived, there could have hardly been an indictment as cutting as the beautifully engraved repeating rifle in his left hand and the fountain pen in his right. The pair walked together until they were within arm's reach of the ghastly effigy, and as Eamon reached out and touched his dry, leathery skin, he remarked, "He has red hair." So just in the passage before, we learn what happened to the author that used to live there, who is sort of gotten all these animals stuck there, and it is the debt that they're hoping to have paid. And so this is our final gift, gift number 5. And don't worry, we didn't get a ghastly effigy of a old dried up author who has the frozen expression that he died with. But the animals were seeking their revenge, basically. But what we did get was this really cool pen that is fashioned to look like a quill. So it actually has a feather on it. And then, of course, you just have this nice pen that you turn and you can write with. So I actually thought it was kind of a cool item. So again, I'm glad that we got that and not the rifle, for example. So this is an example where I think they did a great job of a looser interpretation, as was the case with the owl scarf. Don't forget, we also got that fun little timetable or hourglass that had 3 different times. We got some tea to go in my favorite item, which was of course the teacup and saucer. But again, this was a weird book. The premise sounds really strange, but as someone who doesn't usually like horror or fantasy, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really cool, very different, very unique novel, and definitely one that I thought was kind of worth a read. So you guys let me know if you have read it. What is your favorite childhood story that you would like to set foot into the pages, where you would actually love to speak to the characters? Careful what you wish for, but I would love to hear what you think in the comments below, what that favorite childhood story is. And I will see you all very, very soon in my next unboxing.